Robert Patterson stepped into his dimly lit office, loosening the tie that had felt like a noose around his neck all evening. The gala had been as tedious as ever. An endless parade of forced smiles, hollow handshakes, and empty pleasantries from people who only wanted something from him. It was the price of success, he reminded himself. But now, finally, he could retreat into his sanctuary, enjoy a rare moment of solitude before heading home. Or so he thought. The sight on his sleek leather couch stopped him cold. A small figure lay curled up, tangled in an oversized hoodie, fast asleep. For a fleeting second, Robert wondered if exhaustion had driven him to hallucinate. How could a child possibly have bypassed security and made it to the highest floor of Patterson Enterprises? Yet there he was, real as the glittering city skyline, framed by the massive glass windows behind him. Robert stepped closer, his sharp eyes scanning the boy. He couldn't have been older than 7 or 8, He reached forward and gently took it from him. The image was old, the edges worn, but when it registered, the breath left his lungs in a rush. It was a picture of him, younger, carefree, and Claire. Claire. Robert hadn't seen her in over a decade. He'd spent years trying not to think about her, about the way she had vanished from his life without a word. And yet here she was, smiling back at him from the past, standing next to the man he used to be. His grip on the photo tightened. "Where is your mother?" he asked, his voice quieter now, controlled. Matteo's expression shifted. His small hands twisted nervously in his hoodie, his feet swinging slightly off the couch. "She's gone," he said after a moment, his eyes dropping to the floor. The word hit Robert like an alarm, sharp, final. Gone. Before he could press further, the door burst open. 2 security guards rushed in, radios crackling, their eyes already scanning the room for the intruder. Matteo tensed immediately, his small body talked about me? Robert asked, unable to stop himself. Matteo shrugged. Just that you were important, that you used to be someone she cared about. He scratched at the sleeve of his hoodie. She never told me why you weren't around. Robert's stomach twisted. He looked at Margot wordlessly, signaling her to do what she did best, find answers. She nodded, already pulling out her phone as she strolled out of the office. In the silence that followed, Robert took a slow breath, staring at Matteo. He had too many questions and not nearly enough patience for the kid's easygoing attitude. But before he could press further, Matteo's attention drifted to Robert's laptop, which was open on the desk. "Whoa!" Matteo said, eyes lighting up. "Is this your computer? This thing looks expensive." "Don't touch it," Robert warned. Too late. Matteo's fingers were already tapping at the keyboard, his curiosity far outweighing any sense of caution. Robert lunged forward. But just as he reached for the laptop, "Talked about me?" Robert asked, unable to stop himself. Matteo shrugged. Just that you were important, that you used to be someone she cared about. He scratched at the sleeve of his hoodie. She never told me why you weren't around. Robert's stomach twisted. He looked at Margot wordlessly, signaling her to do what she did best, find answers. She nodded, already pulling out her phone as she strolled out of the office. In the silence that followed, Robert took a slow breath, staring at Matteo. He had too many questions and not nearly enough patience for the kid's easygoing attitude. But before he could press further, Matteo's attention drifted to Robert's laptop, which was open on the desk. "Whoa," Matteo said, eyes lighting up. "Is this your computer? This thing looks expensive." "Don't touch it," Robert warned. Too late. Matteo's fingers were already tapping at the keyboard, his curiosity far outweighing any sense of caution. Robert lunged forward, but just as he reached for the laptop, Robert had sent Marto to one of the guest rooms in his penthouse, yet the boy's words kept circling in his mind like an unrelenting storm. "Are you my dad?" Those 5 simple words felt heavier than anything Robert had ever encountered. And then there was the photograph, the old, worn picture of him and Claire. His instinct screamed that something bigger was at play here, something Claire had never told him. But now she was gone, leaving behind only questions, and this boy who had appeared out of nowhere, claiming to be looking for him. By morning, Robert was no closer to making sense of it all. Exhausted but restless, he walked into his office earlier than usual, coffee in hand. He stopped short at the sight before him. Marto was already wide awake, sitting in Robert's oversized office chair, legs dangling as he spun himself in slow circles. The sleek, minimalist workspace Robert prided himself on was thoroughly disrupted. His normally pristine desk, Matto shrugged. "Just that you were important, that you used to be someone she cared about." He scratched at the sleeve of his hoodie. "She never told me why you weren't around." Robert's stomach twisted. Before he could press further, Matto's attention drifted to Robert's laptop, which sat open on the desk. "Whoa!" Matto exclaimed, eyes lighting up. "Is this your computer? This thing looks expensive." Robert frowned. "Don't touch it." Too late. Matto's fingers were already tapping at the keyboard, his curiosity far outweighing any sense of caution. Robert lunged forward, but just as he reached for the laptop, Matto hit a key. "Oh," Matto murmured, tilting his head. "Oops." Robert glanced at the screen, his stomach dropping. An email had just been sent out to every single one of his investors. Matto gave him a sheepish look. "I can explain," Matto said quickly. Robert exhaled through his nose. "I highly doubt that." Margot stormed back in, phone in hand. "Lot?" Robert asked, his tone softer than usual. Matteo nodded, swallowing his food before responding. "Yeah, she loved this kind of stuff. Said fancy restaurants were for people who forgot how to enjoy life." He grinned mischievously, clearly implying that Robert might fall into that category. Robert raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. Instead, he leaned back in the booth, observing Matteo as he devoured his meal with unapologetic enthusiasm. There was something raw and genuine about the kid, something refreshingly human. It made Robert uncomfortable in ways he couldn't quite articulate. Maybe it was because Matteo reminded him too much of CLA, scrappy, unfiltered, full of fire. The thought of her hit him again like a punch to the gut. Gone. She was gone, and he hadn't even known, hadn't tried to find out. And now here was this boy, a piece of her legacy, sitting across from him, wearing her locket around his neck. talking about burgers and fries as if the weight of the world wasn't Prez. Just said you were someone special, someone she cared about once. The words landed like lead, heavy and final. Special, cared about once, past tense, as if whatever they'd shared had been neatly boxed up and stored away, filed under things best forgotten. But Matteo's presence proved otherwise. She hadn't forgotten. She'd left behind a part of herself, a son who carried pieces of her spirit, her stubbornness, her humour. They finished their meal in relative silence, Matteo polishing off his milkshake while Robert stared out the window, lost in thought. When the check came, Robert reached for it automatically, only to have Matteo grab it first. "Hey, old man," Matteo teased, grinning despite the lingering tension. "You already fed me chocolate and bought lunch. Let me cover dessert." Robert smirked, shaking his head. "Kid, you're impossible." "And yet, here we are," Matteo shot back, sliding out of the booth with the check in hand. "Admit it, you'd miss me if I left." Robert didn't respond. His first instinct was to find a way out. Not entirely, of course. He wouldn't abandon the kid. But surely there was a solution. Something that made more sense than him raising a child. Boarding schools existed for situations like this. World-renowned academies catering to children from unique circumstances. He could provide everything Matto needed: education, security, a future. All without dismantling the life he'd spent years perfecting. It made sense. Almost too much sense. He was almost convinced it was the right choice when Margot stormed into his office and shattered the fragile illusion he'd constructed. "Are you seriously considering shipping him off to some cold, sterile boarding school?" she demanded, arms crossed, her expression sharp enough to cut through steel. Robert exhaled slowly, refusing to meet her gaze. "It's what's best for him." "No, it's what's easiest for you," Margot shot back, her voice dripping with disdain. "You're staying here, with me." Matto blinked again, sitting up slightly. "For how long?" Robert's throat tightened, forcing the words out. He said, "For as long as you want." And for the first time in years, Robert felt something shift inside him. Not fear, not panic, but the faintest glimmer of hope. Ask, explain. The silence between them stretched taut, a single heartbeat hanging in the air. Then Matteo broke it with a grin, a wide, relieved one that lit up his entire face. "So, forever?" Robert sighed, shaking his head. "Don't push it." Matteo flopped back onto his pillow, still grinning ear to ear. "Knew you wouldn't send me away." Robert arched a skeptical brow. "You were that sure?" "Yep," Matteo said confidently. "You like me too much." Robert snorted. "Debatable." Matteo just smirked, his eyelids drooping as sleep began to reclaim him. Robert sat there for a long time, watching the boy drift off. He tried to make peace with the fact that his life had just changed in ways he hadn't been prepared for, and for the first time, he wasn't entirely sure he wanted to change it back. The next morning, Matteo was buzzing with energy. Over breakfast, he declared, "Since I'm staying, we need to do something important." Robert, nursing his coffee and trying to wake up, eyed him warily. Do I even want? His solution: hire professionals. Robert prided himself on efficiency, and if parenting was going to be part of his life, surely there were experts who could help. Within 48 hours, he had assembled a team of nannies, child psychologists, and educational consultants, all carefully vetted and highly qualified. Matteo fired every single one of them. The first nanny had been too serious. The second was too old. Matteo's words, not Robert's. The third apparently smelled like weird soap. And the fourth? Well, that had been a disaster. She lasted exactly 1 hour before Matteo locked her out of the apartment, barricading the door with dining chairs and calmly informing Robert, "This is a no-nanny household now." Robert had nearly lost his mind. Margot, of course, found the entire situation hilarious. "You're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and you're losing a power struggle to a 10-year-old, she said. He's already won. Robert muttered something about rewriting his will out of pure spite before stalking off to deal with the fallout. But despite the chaos, the embarrassment, and the sheer impossibility of it all, he couldn't deny one thing. For the first time in years, his life felt alive. Ask, explain. The room fell silent for a heartbeat, and then Matteo's face split into a wide, relieved grin. So, forever. Robert sighed, shaking his head with mock exasperation. Don't push it. Matteo flopped back onto his pillow, still grinning ear to ear. I knew you wouldn't send me away. Robert arched an eyebrow. You were that sure? Yep, Matteo said confidently, propping himself up on one elbow. You like me too much. Robert snorted. Debatable. Matteo just smirked, his eyelids drooping as sleep began to reclaim him. Robert sat there for a long time after Matteo drifted off, staring at the boy who had turned his meticulously ordered life upside down. He tried to murmur. Robert, accustomed to structure, order, and silence, felt like he'd been thrown into the deep end of an Olympic-sized pool with bricks tied to his ankles. His solution? Hire professionals. Robert prided himself on efficiency, and if parenting was going to be part of his life, surely there were experts who could help. Within 48 hours, he had assembled a team of nannies, child psychologists, and educational consultants, each one carefully vetted and highly qualified. Matteo fired every single one of them. The first nanny had been too serious. The second was too old, Matteo's words, not Robert's. The third apparently smelled like weird soap. And the fourth? Well, that had been a disaster. She lasted exactly 1 hour before Matteo locked her out of the apartment, barricading the door with dining chairs and informing Robert, very calmly, that this was officially a no-nanny household. Robert nearly lost his mind. Margot, of course, found the entire situation hilarious. "You're the Sequox?" Robert had always prided himself on being untouchable, his laptop locked down with security settings so intense that even the most elite hackers would think twice before attempting a breach. But life, as it turned out, was far more complicated than any digital fortress. After weeks of wrestling with guilt and self-doubt, he finally accepted the truth. He needed to be present in Matteo's life. Not halfway, not through proxies or excuses, but fully. No more outsourcing fatherhood. No more avoidance. It was time to step up. The